Welcome. This is our Creating Your Openstack Sandbox presentation. So we mentioned this earlier in the general meeting today during the education portion. It came up a lot with how do I start playing around with, a Linux environment, some services I want to test out. I know when I was mentioning IRSEC, someone asked me, I don't know anything of what you talked about. How do I get experience in that? So I told them, give it a Google search and start playing around with it. And OpenStack is a great way to do it. And we're going to show you how that works. So first, David.
Oh, all right. This is supposed to be my Who Am I? This is just from the eBoard presentation. I'm David. This would have different stuff, but I put the wrong slide. Yeah, that's kind of just, I'm staying out the way. Me and my girlfriend, me and Michael, me with an alligator, basically sums it up. Yeah, apply for war driving.
Yep, me and David are heading the war driving mentorship group. And this is me. This is my Who Am I, also stolen from my eBoard presentation, just changed the words around a little bit. I am from Staten Island, third-year cybersecurity major and math minor. I work for DHS, not for long, but well, my internship is about to end. I'm not getting fired. And those are just basically like my main tenets, like basketball, jazz, food, plants, and cats. I'm like all over the place with what I do. Like I'm an ops, red team. I love vulnerability research. I highly recommend it Monday and Tuesday, 7 to 10 p.m. Home labbing, and I am, like I said, war driving co-lead. What's up?
I don't know.
We cannot tell. Okay, perfect. All right. So let's start off with what is OpenStack. So you'll hear us talk a lot about OpenStack or just our stack. So you can imagine this as, well, not imagine, this is what it is. It is a stack of servers which we combine into a service called OpenStack. So OpenStack is a set of software tools for building and managing cloud computing platforms for public and private clouds. So when you hear OpenStack, you can think of it as our own little cloud deployment, right? We have a stack of servers in our server room, which we combine their resources, all their hardware and stuff like that into OpenStack, and basically just an aggregation of all of their resources, and we can allocate a certain like a little bit of those resources to you for you to use however you like. So yeah, as RITSEC members, you can request an allocation of these resources for your own use. That is the instructions that I posted earlier today in the announcements, where I told you to go into the help desk, request an OpenStack account, so that the ops team can go make that for you. Basically, what you're doing when you do that is you ask the ops team, which manages the OpenStack servers, to create an account for you, and that account comes with the basic member project that we have, like a certain allocation of resources, like you'll get 50 gigs of RAM, 250 gigabytes of storage, I think 20 virtual CPUs, and basically you can use that however you would like to. And so once you have these resources, what are you going to do with them? So these are some things you can do. So with the Sandbox environment, you really, sky's the limit. You can get hands-on experience with network services, automation, or just learning different systems. So some automation tools you'll see over here, we have like Ansible, Terraform, Docker, Jenkins. These are all really good software you will see in like an enterprise environment. Really great to get an experience with them. So like if you work for some company and they want to automate some of their services, you'll say you don't want to put it up manually, so you'll use something like Ansible to run a script, and it'll configure stuff without you having to go manually on your keyboard. While I can't, obviously this is not a presentation about all the different services. I would highly recommend going to OpsIG so you can learn about these individual services and get practice with the stuff that you will see later on. All right, so just starting off, you want to start with just like how the VM works?
Yeah, this is just real quick. How to, if you've ever used like Vulture, or if you've used Azure not as much, but if you've used Vulture, OpenStack is quite a bit like that, where you go through, you name your project, you can put a description. I never do. It's like commenting your code. You select a source. That's literally, we have Ubuntu, we have Debian, we have Mint, we have a lot of Linux distributions. We have probably like 200 or 300 gigabytes of just ISO files, I would guess, because we have a lot of versions too. If there's a particular version you need to run for a test environment, um, yeah, it's pretty like run of the mill, pretty standard. You can set how much size you get for your VM, and like Maxim said, although you start with 250 gigabytes, if for some weird reason you need more, we can give you more. We can also give you more RAM, more virtual CPUs. Here's our flavor.
Yeah. So sorry, I forgot to mention. This is kind of meant for people to just like kind of follow along. So if you want to get familiar with how to just build out a virtual machine, how to navigate OpenStack, you can log into the ops credentials or the OpenStack credentials you got through the help desk ticket you submitted, if you submitted one, or if you previously had one. And the way you get to this like initial like thing to start creating the VM is you would go to compute, and then you will click instances and launch instance, and then this is where you start getting to like the creating the VMs and stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I should ask. It's okay if not, because this is also just going to be like a recording for people to reference. Is anyone like following along live trying to make a VM in OpenStack? Yikes. Great job, Maxim. All right. Are you like where we're at? Yeah, you're at the creating the VM. All right. Uh, the second half of this will show you how to like expose it, not publicly, but so you can SSH in and actually work on it. And then at OpsIG, we'll be going over things like Cloudflare tunnels if you want to publicly expose your VM. Like if you wanted to host a Minecraft server on it, for example, it's pretty popular. But yeah, this is the flavor tab. There is a lot of different flavors, and the naming is, it's not arbitrary, but just look at what you need in terms of vCPUs and RAM. There's a couple of weird ones, like there's one for, it's like OKC4 or OCK4D, whatever that is. There's one with like a ton of RAM, not a lot of virtual CPUs. I typically use like L3 small or L2 micro, because when you're running Linux, you honestly don't need many resources. To pick one, you just click the arrow and it'll like move up to the top. All right. This is the networks tab. If you're just making a VM and you just want to like get something up quick, you don't really need this tab. But if you're getting like deep into OpenStack and you want to set up like a jump box and then have a bunch of like private services that you have not exposed through Cloudflare or Zero-Tier or Tailscale, you can make your own like routers and your own networks in OpenStack to just make your own like topology. That's what we do for competitions, for example. And yeah.
And yeah, this is where, like I mentioned previously, if you're looking to get more information on like how networking and just like more information on network fundamentals, this is a great way to learn, because basically it's not very easy for you to just kind of spin up your own router and figure out how how it interfaces with like a local network, and how that transfers to a wide area network. So I don't know if people have any experience yet in like if you had routing and switching, or just previously, like if you talked about like TCP/IP, like networks in general, where you have basically like your internet, or like the way it's set up in with the ClubNet that you'll see here. We have like our RIT wide area network, which is basically just our public public IPs to reach the internet, and we have our ClubNet, which is our own what Ops created as our own network, which is segmented from the public internet. It's our private network, and that's where all those VMs would exist. And it's a great way to learn how like how does a private network differ from a public network? What does that transfer of data actually look like when it's going over the wire? And next, speaking on the topic of networking, is the security groups. So, like the networks, you'll have a default security group, and just like a really high level overview of what's going on in a security group. Say you want a specific type of internet or of like network communication going through either in or out of the VM. What? Yeah, sure. Go ahead if you want.
Yeah, so security groups, for me personally, the way I do this, I have like an SSH security group that allows port 22 from all IPs. The default security group, it allows all ports from all IPs. So if you don't want any particular firewalls, you can just leave default up. You can also leave default up and then do like a UFW firewall inside of your Linux VM. But if you wanted to deploy a lot of boxes and you didn't want to individually configure the security groups, you can make groupings in OpenStack, and then you can apply a bunch of them very easily to each of your VMs so that you can get consistency. I believe they can also be deployed with the Terraform or Ansible for your container if you start setting that up.
Yep. Okay. All right, and next, this is really important. I realized I forgot to. Can you go and drop the cloud in the announcements real quick? Yeah. Okay. So this script is pretty critical for your virtual machine to start working. Basically, it's telling OpenStack what should I do for this on boot up for this VM. So you'll see over here, like users, right? We have one user. In this case, this one is Maxim. It belongs to the sudo group, so it can, as you saw before with like in the intro to Linux slides, it can escalate privileges to execute some, more privileged actions that it needs to do. That's the the shell that it got when you saw it in the Linux presentation. You also have the password that that user is going to use to log in, as well as the SSH authorized keys. So like David said, we're going to set up a way for you to access it from your local machine, not just through having a direct Ethernet connection to the club net. So you would put your SSH key, your public key in there. If you don't have one, it should be in your home directory in a hidden folder named .ssh, and it's going to be some /id underscore whatever .pub, and you would put that there. If you don't have one, just run SSH keygen, say yes to the prompts until you have one. It's going to be important later on because you don't want to skip the step where you don't upload an SSH key into that machine, because then trying to log in is just going to be a pain. And yeah, so once that's done, you can launch the instance. There'll be just like a little bit of like, it's going to load for a bit, and then there's not going to be any more like progress bar, and then you'll have access to the console. So if you go to compute instances, you click on your instance name, and you go to console, you'll have access to a command line on your virtual machine. And here, if you want to just start playing around with stuff, like if you're interested by the presentation we had with Intro to Linux today, and you want to start playing around with Linux, but you don't want to host that on your own laptop, you can do this, and now you have an ability to just play around with anything we talked about today. However, there is an issue where if you wanted to just, like I mentioned before, SSH or just communicate directly with that VM from your local machine, the ClubNet firewall will stop that. So I know I don't want to go too far into how just networking works, but a firewall will only permit certain traffic to get through, and you trying to access your machine is not one of the traffic that it can allow. So a solution to that is we need some kind of VPN connection. what David's going to talk about with zero tier is what we call peer-to-peer, a mesh VPN connection, where you have a virtual machine that you use to communicate directly, and it has some kind of connection which zero tier sets up so you can get through the firewall and start interfacing with your VM.
Oh yeah. Many of you have probably heard of like WireGuard or Tailscale, or if you have your own personal VPN you pay for, maybe like Norton VPN. These are all providers that you can use to VPN, but in our case, we're using zero tier because it lets you connect to a device that doesn't have a public IP address using an IP that you can actually access through zero tier. According to them, they don't track your information, but keep in mind that you can't trust any of these companies, so they probably track your information. So don't send anything like super secret across it. If you want to do zero tier like right now on your Stack VM, just make sure that whatever account you're on, you have access to sudo, and go to docs.zerotier.com/start because it will help to have the web page open. And yeah, zero tier is really cool because you can get a bunch of devices on the same virtual network, and then you can communicate across all of them without having to have public IPs, which, as Maxim just talked about, we really need for the stack. So optional initial setup, if you remember we talked about security groups. If you want to make one for zero tier, it uses TCP on port 9993, but most people are probably just going to leave up the default security group. I do not blame you. All right, so you're going to want to start by making an account on making a VM on the stack. I use Debian, and I use Debian Bullseye 12 because sometimes we've had trouble with Debian 11. We've had trouble with 12. And then when you're on the zero tier website, you're just going to click create an account, follow the steps. It's very generic. And then once you're on their account, you create a network. It'll get you to basically where I'm at now, where it says you have 1 out of 3 networks. It's definitely not hard yet, and it never gets hard. It's actually really easy to set up zero tier. And I'm kind of waffling right now because I want to give people time just in case. Once you have your network, you click on it. For me, I don't know why it named it Desperate Kleinschmidt. It was kind of a weird name, but whatever. When you click on it, you'll get a little ID to join the network. Once you have this ID, you're going to want to go back to your VM. This is the command to get zero tier on your VM. It's on their website if you're following the start guide. This is literally it. You just curl their install. It's just a subdomain. And there is a secure install with GPG where you add it to your key ring, and then it says that it's fully legit, and it checks the checksum. But live on the risky side. Who cares? It takes way too long to type out the GPG install, so just use the quick one. You're probably fine. Nobody's out to get you. I'll leave this up for a second because this video is just going to be copy-pasted anytime somebody asks, how do I access my Stack VM in OpsIG? Because it's easier than explaining it. Yeah, but again, if you're on the zero tier website, this is there. Once you're in, you literally just run that command. It'll tell you the address of your zero tier instance, and then you just sudo zero tier CLI join, and then the ID of your network. And wait till you see this magic trick. When you do that, that's just it. You're done for the VM, because then it joins your network. You'll see one device has joined this network. You can see the address here. It's blocked out because I'm using this. But you can see the little numbers there. You can figure out the rest from 7A. Probably saved you 20 billion years of cracking the hash. Yeah, what you're going to want to do, though, is they have this little checkbox right here. Make sure you click that, and then make sure you click authorize. If you don't authorize it, it's just not going to work. Yeah, and then on your laptop, just download it. For me, I'm on Windows. You can literally just download their executable and run it, and you'll get the zero tier CLI. Make sure you're running it as root if you're on Windows. And then you do the same thing. You just zero tier CLI join, then the ID of the network. It'll tell you that the join was okay. You're going to go back to the website. And when you're on the website, you're just same thing. You got to click the box. This one here. This one was with my laptop. You gotta click authorize. It got cut out. Doesn't really matter. And then that's it. It gives you an IP address that's inside of a local network where you're gonna be able to access either direction if your firewalls are set up. And for me, the .15 IP address was Openstack, and .226 was my laptop. And this whole process takes like actually 5 minutes. Like, it is taking longer to say how to do this than it does to do it. And then you can just connect. I mean, the name of my user was Horizon because I was copy and pasting the config. If you use the config, at some point in time, you're gonna copy and paste just like random credentials, and you're gonna be like, oh crap, I gotta remake the VM, I forgot the password. I've had to do that a lot. But yeah, you can just SSH, and that's just like it. There's really not a lot of overhead in terms of setup, and yeah.
Yep. And now you can just connect to it. You no longer only have to interface with it through the console on OpenStack. Like we talked about in the Linux presentation today, if you're familiar at all with SSH, it should be very simple because you put your SSH key on the VM initially with that cloud init script that we showed you. And what now? So we went over like a really high level overview of how OpenStack works and all this, like, we kind of abstracted most of the information that you're giving it when you're creating your VM, as well as like how zero tier actually works. Like, what is the magic behind it just connecting your computer to your stack VM and like basically being able to not get around the firewall, but being able to work with the firewall. And if you're interested on stuff like that and how to like enable like services and automation on a large scale, so like, you know, the same stuff that we would do to run our competitions, because all of our competitions are completely on OpenStack. So although we're not manually following through with like, you know, create VM, like click next, we have ways to automate that where we run a script and it can bring up, you know, 15 teams, 5 people each. There's going to be at least one box. There's at least 75 virtual machines you're creating like this. So if you're interested in like learning more of how that works, I definitely recommend going to OpsIG. It's going to happen Mondays, 6 to 7 p.m. at Cyber 2780. Next, like we mentioned before, even though your VM is going to be currently on ClubNet, you can try and make your own network to learn how to segment, create your own private network and separate it from a wide area network. And if you're just looking at some services you want to think about hosting, definitely you can check out Awesome Self-Hosted on GitHub. They'll have just like places where it'll teach you how to deploy like I don't know, like a finance manager or a to-do list or like a cloud storage, and it'll walk you through that, and you can do it on your OpenStack VM if you are able to connect to it through zero tier and just interface it through your laptop. And yeah, sorry that we were going kind of fast through just all these steps. We just wanted to kind of show people how simple it is to just start getting like working on stuff like as soon as possible, and to just start. It's like the best way to get experience is just by doing this hands-on stuff like that. So are there any questions about OpenStack, how to create a VM? Yeah, Mamadou. Yeah. So yeah.
The question was, once you create your VM, is it required to use zero tier? And more specifically, is it required to use zero tier to connect to it externally? You do not have to use zero tier. There are other solutions. Zero tier is really good for just connecting peer-to-peer, if you will, like your laptop to the stack. There's another option called Cloudflare tunnels. Cloudflare tunnels is really good because it lets you expose it publicly while still applying security rules to it. So for example, if you have ever gone to like registry.ritsec.club where all the documents are hosted, if not for the fact that I had a public IP, that would be hosted through a Cloudflare tunnel because I want many people to be able to do it instead of just peer-to-peer. There's also Tailscale. Tailscale is another option where you can set up a grouping of devices and connect to them. But to answer less broadly, zero tier is an option because it lets you connect externally. If you don't have some form of VPN or some form of exposing it externally, then you'll only be able to interact with it through the stack console, or if you already have a jump box on the stack to access an internal network. Otherwise, you would have to use the console, and the console is not a lot of fun. Well, seeing no more questions, that's it.